In this conversation, I sit down with Tim Popadic and we talk about how to use technology to reach your neighbors. Well, hello again. Welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab, the podcast dedicated to conversations that empower healthy churches. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad to have another conversation, and we're so thankful for you. Now, a little while ago, we got to sit down with a handful of people at a conference and have some really great conversations. Not only was it awesome to talk to a handful of people serving churches and church leaders like yourself, but also just to sit down in person and have a conversation versus the virtual. Sometimes that is a nice little break, and we had some really great conversations, one of which we're going to bring you today. Now, before we jump in, as always, I want to ask if you could share this with somebody, it would mean so much to us. If you find this podcast helpful, or even just this episode, if you want to send a link, leave a review, subscribe, comment, that just helps us get these conversations out to more people. So as always, we so appreciate that. Now, we're excited for our conversation today with Tim Popadic, the executive director of the Bless app. Now, Tim has served in his time as a pastor. He's worked as a movie producer and tech entrepreneur, and has spearheaded numerous national initiatives, partnering with organizations like Chick-fil-A and Focus on the Family. Over 15 years, he's championed technology-driven, citywide endeavors promoting healthy relationships, outreach, and prayer. In 2023, Tim established the Flourishing Cooperative, a 501c3 dedicated to visualizing human flourishing. He also launched the blessapp.com, helping communities and loving their neighbors well. In this conversation, we dive into how do you use technology to reach your neighbors? What does it look like? And how can not only church leaders, but those in your church harness that for the kingdom of God? This was such a great conversation. So excited for it. And we're going to dive in now to my conversation with Tim Popadic.
Well, Tim, thanks so much for taking some time to sit down and talk and to be on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, one question we ask everybody. There's the public bio, right? The thing that makes the back of the book or the conference speaker or website, whatever.
Yeah.
But what's something that doesn't make the public bio that all your friends, family would know about you?
Well, we've been super grateful. We've got 4 boys, and we do a bunch of stuff with them, which is super exciting. But one of the things that we've had the privilege of doing is actually doing a lot of filmmaking.
Oh, interesting.
And stuff that's, so like each of our sons has had like a level of, interest in filmmaking. So we've created everything from documentaries to feature-length movies. We had one that was a wide release.
Is that right?
Which was fun, yeah.
Wow.
So it's just something fun. We don't tell too many people about it, but yeah.
That's something too that, because I've kind of a background in video production and stuff like that, but that's one of those things that with other people to learn, but then also create and experiment, and that can be really fun. So
it's a great way. I think even if you're trying to build something or tell, like for me, it's always about telling the story and kind of getting into the narrative of that, and teaching them those kinds of life skills has been fun.
Yeah,
so
that's very cool. I love it. Well, I'd love to jump in just hearing about the Bless app and really dive into what it is. Now, you guys have a quote on your website that grabbed me, speaking of the power of story, just from the quote, but the number one tool to love your neighbor as yourself. Obviously, that's such a call for followers of Jesus, but can you kind of unpack that and even how does it relate to being able to love your neighbor as yourself?
That's great. Scott, one of the things, and I'll tell you a little bit of a story. I got to know the guy that created the Bless app. It was called Bless Every Home, for the first iteration of it. And we just recently kind of went through the whole change process. And he created it with something really unique in mind. And I think of what happened to the church world during COVID.
Yeah.
When we were kind of stuck, and I was leading a prayer ministry just kind of for fun, we'll say that. And I remember we were doing these prayer events, we were doing a bunch of stuff, and then the whole world stopped.
Yeah.
And I remember being subjected to just the screen, the Zoom screen. And I remember looking out at that screen and seeing hundreds of people that wanted to gather for prayer. And these were people that couldn't get back to their churches.
Yeah.
They couldn't, go and serve. There were so many things that they couldn't do. And it was almost as if they were this group of disengaged Christians.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that they could do was come to this prayer meeting, and we would pray for folks.
Yeah.
And as I sat there, I was like just looking at this, I was like, man, have we done a disservice to this group of believers? Like, there has to be another way to empower them to be like followers of Christ, that if the church shut down or if their place of worship shut down, they didn't have to just stop.
Yeah.
Right? There has to be some way to like get them to live on mission.
Yeah.
And so it was shortly after that experience that I met Chris Cooper and began to see what he was developing with Bless Every Home. What I love about that app is it's completely a missional app.
I love it.
And so, if I name other technology, what I'll do is not name other technologies, but you'll get the idea. There are plenty of prayer platforms out there, prayer apps.
Sure.
That do, and some of them are subscription based. There are a bunch of them that are free, but there are a ton of apps and technology that exist within the Christian ecosystem that encourages you to go deeper with your faith, and it's very personal. It's like, hey, develop these habits, or say a prayer like this, or hey, here's how somebody else prays, and you're like learning these practices. Very few, you can count them probably on a hand, are actually designed to send people out, to actually accomplish mission. And that's the beauty of the Bless app, is it's to really empower people to live on mission, to own really the lostness of their communities, and those are the things that drew me to the app. So.
And I think it's a great point, and especially as I think of what church leaders and pastors are trying to do. Yes, there is a part of our faith that is spiritual formation, right, and it's the things forming in us, but obviously we were sent on a mission and sent to go and to reach out, and that's I think what's really interesting to me is how do you pair, and you're probably aware of more, but the Bless app to me seems like it stands alone in actually helping pair technology with going out and being sent, and that combination to me is really interesting into how then it can help people live on mission. So, I mean, how have you seen it sort of help people do that?
Well, one thing that probably helps us stand out from the crowd, and I'll tell you sort of the secret sauce so you understand why we're so different. So in the world of data sharing, so like if you were to download the Bless app right now, it's going to ask you a couple questions. One is your name. The second thing it's going to ask for is your home address. And then maybe the third thing it's going to ask is, are you associated with a church or a ministry that you call home? Those are like three of the basic questions. So when a person gives their name, obviously we want to know who you are, but you're giving us some information about yourself. The second thing you're giving us is your home address. When you give us that home address, what we will do for you in return is we populate the names of 40 of your neighbors. And we actually lay the whole thing out in a map, right? Wow. And so we're actually sharing data with you in that moment. Very much like you would have had, I mean, if, Scott, you're old enough probably to remember white pages. And so it's flipping through so them, simple, right? It's like the simple idea. So it's, I need to remind the listening audience, this is all publicly available data. And so what happens is I think sometimes people will see some of this data and they'll go, oh my goodness, how did they get this information?
Sure.
Anybody can get that information on you. It's just so we organize it in a way for you to pray and to care for your neighbors. And to be intentional, to love your neighbor in such a unique way. So, but what makes us different is if we were an LLC, right? So if we were just a regular company, technically we would have to be a data broker.
Okay.
And so the legalities behind being a data broker are, let me just tell you, you don't want to be a data broker. Okay? Now, the fact that we are actually a 501c3, we're a ministry.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it opens up the world of being able to handle data.
Wow.
And so that's what makes us unique. So that we're a ministry that helps then other churches take that data and or believers and begin to understand how to use it for good. And there's so many organizations that are LLCs, right? So like corporations like the Targets, and they're using the data really to have you do certain things, right?
Drive revenue.
They're driving revenue stuff. Our revenue is what we would call spiritual ROI.
Yeah, I love it.
And we're trying to help you live on mission. One of the cool things, when we were looking at Bless Every Home last fall to actually purchase the assets of Bless Every Home and start our new company, we decided we were going to do a survey. Okay. And so we sent out a survey to about 3,000 of our users. It wasn't all of our users. We just picked a subset, sent it to them, and gave them what we call a Net Promoter Score. Are you familiar with a Net Promoter Score?
Yep.
And so with that, when a person gives a Net Promoter Score, it's basically asking them, how likely are you to recommend this product to a friend of yours? And so to give you an example, like a lousy Net Promoter Score would be anything like 30 and under. That would be lousy. Apple has a 48% Net Promoter Score, right?
Okay.
Give you an idea. We came in at 52%.
Wow.
Which we were blown away. We're like, there's no way that some Christian product has a 52% Net Promoter Score. But the next thing we discovered, which was super interesting to us, and again, we've just recently gone through a whole UX design and all that to kind of enhance our product. But before we did that, it had a very Scrabble-esque feel about it. It almost looked like you were looking at a Scrabble board.
Okay.
And I say that just because it needed to be updated quite a bit. And that same survey, we discovered that the demographic of our user base was a 61-year-old male.
Interesting.
Now think about that, Scott. Put your ministry hat on. What would it take to motivate a 61-year-old male to do missional living?
Yeah, a lot. A lot. I
mean, like if I said to you, no, this is actually a bunch of the females that are like just crushing it, leading spiritually, you would go, yeah, no, I totally get that.
Yeah.
61-year-old males.
Wow.
Were using this app. And then one of the questions we asked on the survey, what would you do if this was taken away? These guys literally lost their mind.
Wow.
They go, you cannot take this away from us.
Don't do it,
And what we discovered was just like when I talked about the disengaged Christian during COVID, what we discovered was that for these men and for the folks that are using the Bless app, it's like giving people their own franchise of their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you're basically saying, hey, own the lostness of your community.
Yeah.
Do something about it. And like you're literally walking your community, you're praying. Some of the folks, you're meeting people. Sometimes there are actually people that will use this app every day that haven't met any of their neighbors. They're literally just praying for them.
Wow. Well, that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about it, because I know a barrier that, I felt at times in my neighborhood is, how do I get to know people and how do I start to build relationship without just going door to door, right? Knocking on the door and my wife and I, we moved in, we made little cards and some cookies just to, introduce ourselves, say hi. But what I find fascinating is that technology coming along to say, hey, there's actually a way to already start to build a love and care for your neighbors, to know who they are. So I'm curious, have you seen it then really help in that forming relationship? And because obviously there's a sense in which the app is to start a relationship that, hopefully ends up reaching more and more people. So do you kind of see some of that, have some of those stories, that sort of thing?
It's great. I remember, I'll share a couple stories. One buddy of mine who moved into a neighborhood a year ago, and he now knows all of his neighbors. And this was even before we're even talking about the Bless app.
Yeah.
He was telling me about it.
Wow.
And he goes, he's just on and on, like name after name after name of all of his neighbors. Then he said, then I go to the club and I meet this Muslim friend and I call him by name.
Yeah.
And I'm 20 minutes into the conversation when this Muslim guy says to me, hey, wait a minute, how did you know my name?
Yeah.
And he said, I looked at him and I said, that's a crazy question. He said, I've actually been praying for you by name for the last 2 months.
Wow.
And he was so blown away. Now, Muslims are also devout in prayer.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't offended at all. He was just like, this is great. But now they had the commonality of people of prayer.
Amazing.
And it was just a great way for him then to build that relationship. There was another gentleman who was so funny. He downloaded the app and he realized as he saw all the names of the folks in his neighborhood and the lostness of it, that I think it was 2 or 3 doors down, there was a guy and their kids rode on the same bus stop, right?
Okay.
Same bus, school bus, and for 12 years he's known this guy, but he's never intentionalized a relationship. And they've always said stuff like, hey, someday we'll go get coffee.
Yeah.
Hey, someday for 12 years.
Wow.
So he downloads the app and he goes, that day is today.
Yeah.
And he sees the guy at the bus stop and he goes, hey, can we get coffee today? And the guy said, yes.
Wow.
And now it's been 2 months and they've become really, really close friends and praying for each other. And so I think the intentionality of it, even the idea of the cookies and the, one of the guys on our team was sharing a story of how he started to really care for and love his neighbor. And he noticed they live in Colorado, and he said the guy he was an older gentleman, and when the snow would come flying through, Randy said, hey, I'm not gonna ask him, I'm just gonna go and plow his driveway, right? So he would plow his driveway a couple times during the year, because he was an older gentleman. Well, when summer hit, Randy got to the end of summer and realized that he had never mowed his lawn.
Okay.
And one day he noticed that his neighbor, who had been plowing his driveway, had reciprocated and had been mowing his lawn all summer. Wow. And he didn't know that his neighbor had been mowing his lawn. Like, isn't that the way it should be?
Yeah.
Like when we become a blessing to others, And one of the beautiful things about blessing is you'll notice that even in our new logo for Bless, it's really the shape of water drops.
Cool.
It's this idea of passing, like a water is symbolic of passing blessing and becoming a blessing to everybody that you kind of come in touch with. And that's what we think that initially it was pray, care, share, disciple. Those were the words that were inside the Bless app. We've changed it now to read from the acronym of Bless, which begins with prayer, listen, eat, serve, and then share your story. Yeah. And as people do those blessed practices, so yes, I start with prayer. Secondly, I might listen. I might go have a conversation with a neighbor. Yeah. Guess what? You could get a point for that. It's like a spiritual Fitbit. Hey, I just went and had coffee with my neighbor.
Got your badge.
You get your badge, right? But it's just a way to really gamify those relationships and to just take your spiritual practices to another level. Yeah. And one of the beautiful things about the Bless app is the power, because all of what we just talked about is the power that could be unlocked by one person. Yeah. Right. So in your neighborhood, and you can download the Bless app. You could, get that at the Apple Store or Google Play, or whatever. Or you can go to blessapp.com and get it. But the power of that is really powerful. The secret sauce is the church then can actually, and this is our financial model, where we'll sell a subscription to a church. Okay. To then begin to unlock what we call these church tools. Yeah. And with those church tools, imagine if I'm a pastor and I go preach on the blessed practices and say, I do a whole series on blessing your neighbor or being a great neighbor. And as part of that sermon series, I might have you pull out your phone and download the Bless app and actually start blessing your neighbor. Yeah. Well, I then can see all of the activity of those lights. We call them lights.
Okay.
So when a person downloads the app, they become a light, and like I said, you put your name, your address, and then you tell you what church you're part of.
Yeah.
Well, now your church can see your spiritual activity.
Wow.
And it's really, really cool. So then if a new person moves into your neighborhood, the church gets notified that somebody new just moved in your neighborhood, and guess who else gets notified? You get notified.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So you can really intentionalize evangelism and outreach and be super, super strategic about it. So
that's so cool. And that's, again, I mean, we were talking before we hit record, and I was just sharing how much I love sort of the combination of the church and ministry and technology.
Yeah.
Because there is so much. And like you said, there's, with sharing data and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, there are a lot of places using that. It's like the Yellow Pages, right? It's something that just exists today, and it's a tool that most use. But then to see it used for the mission of Jesus and to see it used for ministry is amazing. I'm curious, just given you're in that, I know you've been in that world for a while. What are some other maybe ways that you've seen technology used for the mission, for the church, for ministry? That you found really interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I love things that are missional. I think that's super important. I also think there are other things that I'm observant of right now. Like I do love, I love the program that I've seen like Glue have, where a person can respond to an ad and then they could be directed back to a local church.
Yeah.
I think some of that intentionality is super smooth.
Yeah.
Or a person that might be having a mental health crisis and be able to be connected through, and I think there's a couple different systems out there that do that, which is really, really, I think that's just a super way to help exponential, the what the church can do, the power of the church.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of there are so many great technology platforms out there right now that are available to churches to use. I do think, given the amount of churches and probably the limited number of folks that would actually know how to utilize, or pull together all of those systems, that's probably one of the big obstacles.
Interesting. Yeah.
But I think if you found the right, and it might be that there's a champion inside the church that says, no, we're going to take every neighborhood, or no, we're going to, we want to, whatever the thing is, maybe it's mental health, maybe it's marriage, whatever the champion is, there will be some piece of technology that should help you. And how can we make that lower the barrier, for folks? Because I feel like ministry, with the right piece of technology, could be easier.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I think of things like the printing press, like the radio, like the internet, when you look at it, those are tools that were then used and employed for, the continuing expansion of the kingdom.
Yep.
And it's no different today. They're just different tools.
I mean, when we sit down and we take Bless and I open it up and I show the church tools, when I show them to a church planner, they literally look at me and I just gave them $1 million.
Yeah.
And I essentially just push the computer over to them and I go, could you use this? And they literally look at me and go, you just did all of my work for me.
Yeah.
Because now they've mapped out an entire city. They know where all the gaps are. They know exactly where to put the church. They know who the people are. They know the names.
Yeah. Wow.
They've got all of the data that they need. And they're like going, I used to have to go door to door knocking to find out who these people were. So I think that's a great example of how we can help, advance. Now Bless is currently limited to domestic data.
Okay.
So we are in the U.S. only, but we serve like 8,000 churches right now, which is great. And 130,000 people have downloaded the Bless app and they've begun to bless their neighbors, which is fun. I think we just tipped over 56 million prayers have been prayed.
Amazing. I love that.
I'll share one last story, which I think is fascinating. There's a church in Lake Mary, Florida.
Okay.
And so it's called Lake Mary Church, actually in Lake Mary, Florida.
Yeah.
And they were in a building, moved into a building maybe 3-4 years ago. They were maybe about 1,500 people or so. The pastor was really into neighboring, but he didn't know the names of his neighbors.
Okay.
And he's like, we got to figure out a solution to this. He met, Chris Cooper.
Yeah.
They began to, as a church, to roll Bless out. And they did the whole thing. They hey, we're going to, recruit lights and all that stuff. It's been 18 months now. And in 18 months, they now just tipped over 1,000 lights inside of their little church, right? 1,000 people have become lights. They've adopted something like 27,000 homes, right?
Yeah.
They just tipped over, as a church, praying over 500,000 prayers as a church. And their numbers are now over 4,500 people.
That's amazing.
So it's like when you really put this to work and get everybody, and they're just starting. Like they would tell you, no, we're just starting. There's things we don't even know about yet.
Yeah, wow.
And I feel like that's, they're a great example of like what could be.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's other churches like them that like they're just excited about helping to empower their congregants to really get after it.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. I love hearing, like, again, seeing people take steps and actually going on mission, right? Like it's not just we're going to stay kind of in our church, our building, our crew, but we're going out and the way you guys are supporting that's amazing.
And it's not perfect. Like there are times when it's so funny, like you'll download our app and if you live in a new neighborhood, your house might not be there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But there's little tricks that we've learned on how to like make houses appear because sometimes Google hasn't caught up with it.
Yeah.
But that's the uniqueness of technology is you got to work through some stuff.
Yeah.
But we've got guys that like live on mission. Like our entire team is they're just how can we help you? How can we serve you? What can we do to help you? So I know one of the things that we're doing right now, anyone who's going through, at least in this season, and all churches that are coming on board with Bless, we've got, they're getting six-pack of sermon series from Dave and John Ferguson. So
cool.
If you're familiar with those guys, I know you say you're from Chicago,
so
you know who the Ferguson brothers are.
Yeah.
And those guys have done a great job. Their book about the blessed practices has really blown up. People love it, and it's become a great framework. It's one of the reasons we changed our framework so that we can align with that. And so churches are preaching on the blessed habits. They're creating a culture of blessed, and we're going to see some really crazy transformations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. One of the questions that we ask everyone, the goal of the podcast is conversations that empower healthy churches.
Yep.
And so we like to ask everybody who's on here, in your opinion, what is one essential component of a healthy church?
I think one of the best components of a healthy church is their outward focus, like their ability to reach beyond their walls. I think too often churches fund for Sunday, right? And they're missing out on the greatest opportunity, which is literally beyond Sunday. And what would it look like if a church was able to look beyond that, right, and really begin to pour into and invest into not just the community, but invest in their people to take the community? Like, what would that look like? So I think helping people look beyond Sunday is what we like to say. So
that's very good. I know you shared it earlier. Do you mind just one more time where people can download the Bless app, learn more about what you guys are doing? Can you share that with people?
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for that, Scott. So you can go to theblessapp.com. It's a great place to start. And, from that page, I think we've got both the download for iOS as well as Android. But happy to have you guys join us. There's ways to do it for free. There's also ways if you're a church, if you want to get a demo or do something, sign up there, and we're happy to jump on a call and help you figure out a game plan for your church. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Great.
We'll make sure to link to that. That way people can easily, get there, access that.
Awesome.
We're not done yet, though. We have something we call our Final Five.
All right, let's do it, man.
A little more rapid fire, okay? So coming at you. First one, what's one book that you'd recommend to church leaders?
I'm going to tell you a book that was recommended to me.
Okay.
And it's a book that I have probably read through 7 times now.
All right.
And it's not easy to read, but it's The Secrets of the Secret Place, Bob Sorge.
Okay.
Or Sorge, whatever.
I love the title.
It will, it looks like a devotional book.
Yeah.
It is not.
Okay.
But it's bite-sized pages, but
Yeah.
it is deep. It's unbelievable. I love that book.
It's awesome.
So yeah,
Very good.
Every leader should read that. So.
Yeah. All right, number 2, what's the last thing that you listened to, whether Spotify, Apple Music, anything like that?
I'll tell you one. It would have been for me. This is funny. I love to listen to. I've got a bunch of different pastors that I listen to.
Yeah.
So I love the Church in the City podcast with John Tyson.
Yep.
I love that one. I also listen sometimes to Upper Room, and I'll listen to the Bethel podcast as well. So, and then I'll change it up, and I will also listen to like the Snacks Daily, or was it T-Boy podcast, just about investing and things like that. So I change it up.
Keep it interesting.
Keep
I
it
like
interesting.
it.
Yeah,
That's great. All right, number 3, I'm especially interested in your answer. What's your favorite piece of technology or software? And the only rule we make is you can't see your phone, because people often say that. So we decided to make a rule about it.
So it can't be a phone. So
you could say like an app, but a lot of people are like, I love my phone because it can do so much.
I'll tell you, I love just from the perspective what I use the most. I'd say I've actually really enjoyed. I know people don't necessarily love Google Docs. But it has been such an easy thing for our team to actually stay in sync with everything with Google Docs. I know not everybody loves them, but like for trying to get stuff done, it's become and Slack is the other piece of technology. Those are the two that, like, if I didn't have those two things, I don't know if I could run a business.
Be trouble.
I'd be in trouble.
That's awesome. All right, number 4, what is a quote or piece of advice that has stuck with you over the years?
So this is so my wife and I have always been in we've loved the marriage space, but probably one of my favorite quotes is something that was said to me once by a good friend of ours. He said, "There's no perfect person, there's no perfect friend, there's no perfect lover this side of marriage." And he said, when you marry that person, he said, leave room for their imperfections.
That's good.
So,
that's very good.
And I think of that oftentimes, not just with a spouse, but also with friends and different folks that you're doing life with. So
that's a good reminder.
Yeah.
All right, last one. One thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders.
The biggest thing, if I could communicate to church leaders, would be this: and this is what I would say to people all the time. I've had people who have come up to me through the years, because every campaign that I've ever led, whether it was with technology, whether it was on marriage or prayer or whatever, it's always been through the local church. And I remember sitting at a table once with some pretty high-wheeling philanthropists. And they had an idea of how we were going to do something, and we were pretty adamant that it was going to be through the local church. And they came back to me and they said, "We're going to give you $500,000, but it's on one condition." And they looked at me and they said, "You cannot do it through the local church." And I looked at them and I said, "Keep your money."
Wow.
I said, because no matter how much time, effort, money, frustration that goes into pulling a bunch of pastors together. Scripture is really, really clear that the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
Amen.
And because of that, we will take the hard, tough road every time because we know it is plan A.
Yeah.
And there is no plan B.
Yeah.
So keep your money.
Yeah.
And you know what? A few months later, that money came right back to us.
Yeah, that's how God works, right?
That's
yeah,
right.
That's how God works
yeah,
sometimes.
Totally crazy.
Man, Tim, this has been so encouraging, and we're going to make sure, again, to link so that people can check out the Bless app. Super easy, but just so love your heart, love the way you're merging technology and mission and, getting on the front end of using these tools for the mission of Jesus. I think it's really awesome. So appreciate you sharing with us today.
You got it.
Thank you so much to those of you listening and watching this. Again, we hope it's been helpful. Really encourage you to check out the Bless app and explore everything that it can do for you, for your church, for your people. And we hope this conversation has been helpful. Again, our goal is to empower healthy churches. So if that has been helpful, we'd love for you to share this, whether you send a link, leave a review, subscribe, all that stuff helps us get these conversations into more church leaders' ears. So we invite you to do that. We're thankful for you, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple-to-use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.